Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is my review of the Chambers Custom PHATWMG-R. The name is a bit of a mouthful. I completely understand that. However, what we're looking at is the function and the quality of the gun. If you're not familiar with Chambers Custom, they do custom, it's in the name, 2011 and 2019 double stack 1911 style guns with an obsessive approach to quality, craftsmanship, and fit. This is a hand-built gun, and there aren't many shops out there these days that do completely hand-built, hand-fitted firearms. So there's tiers of quality with all machines, equipment, things. Firearms are no different. You have rack grade, and of course it gets a little nebulous, but I just kind of consider it to be like consumer purchase rack grade being like just assembly line stuff where QC may be done on 1 out of 10, or more realistically 1 out of 100 rifles, and everything else is just assumed to work correctly, and it's up to the individual to see if that's actually true. And then you have like factory fit, which is a higher degree of quality, and then you have like gunsmith fit, which is, again, a higher degree of quality. And then you have kind of like everything is done by hand with the same attention that a jeweler might pay to building a fine-tuned watch or setting a diamond in a perfect ring. Now, if you can tell already, I am a little bit excited about the review of this gun. The reason being, I'm filming this after doing a 2,000 round review, so I already know what my opinion is going into it, and it's kind of hard to hide it. Now, I tried to be as objective as possible when reviewing this gun. I took no steps in this review that I wouldn't take in any other review, being 2,000 rounds, because Chambers Custom has their own proprietary optic mounting system for the gun. You know there's going to be drop tests, and I'm sure that makes some people cringe thinking about, especially if you're familiar with Chambers Custom, knowing what these guns cost. Right up front, I paid full price for this thing, and I'm going to drop it anyway, but we'll get to that. One of the first things that impressed me about this gun is when I first received it, came to the door, have my own FFL, open up the box, didn't even touch the gun, I got this. And this is a full accounting of all the work and all the parts and all the materials that went into the building of this gun. You don't really get this. Sure, you may get a list of features, or like, hey, here's who made your barrel. Obviously, you can see it's Magpul because you're not blind, so we don't have to talk about what grip is on it. But Chambers Custom gave me a full list of everything that went into my gun in case I had any questions. And I gotta be honest, there's some parts on here where I'm like, what is that exactly? I have a faint understanding of what I'm reading, but I'm not quite sure. So for me, this is almost information overload. I would have never considered and didn't even know that this was something that was offered. And for some of you may be like, who cares? I do. If I'm going to spend what I spent on this gun, I like to know exactly what went into it, but I honestly wasn't expecting this level of information, because some people like to keep certain things to be a trade secret, or we're not going to tell people we use this material or parts from this manufacturer, or we're going to kind of insinuate that we do this stuff in-house or whatever. Not the case. I got all the information kind of codified to let me know really the quality of the work that went into the gun. Prior to getting the gun, I was no stranger to Chambers Custom. I met them, a couple of guys from the shop, and it is a small operation, kind of like the mythical man on top of the mountain, except there's more than one guy in the shop building guns. But it's not your assembly line that you may see from some of the other quality 2011/1911 manufacturers that are out there. But after talking to Joe, I was impressed with, and talking to the guys at Chambers, I was impressed with kind of their casual knowledge on the platform. And I am a kind of, I guess, a talented amateur of knowledge when it comes to this particular gun. I've owned quite a few 1911s, and more recently in the past decade, a lot of 2011 or double stack 1911 style guns, this being the most recent. And I've been going through them all, trying to get an idea or trying to get a feel for myself and to do content for video on the quality of what's out there based on where they sit on the tier, of course the tier being completely subjective. One thing I picked up a long time ago when I was an aficionado and collector of 1911s is the fact that you can feel a great deal of the quality just by the reciprocation of the slide, the operation of the safety selector, the press of the trigger, the cock of the hammer, if it has one, the behavior of the grip safety. And then when you go shoot it, you're just kind of affirming what you already felt. At that point, you're only looking at the accuracy and the reliability of the gun. Two things stand out to me immediately. Talking about the features. The first being just the quality relationship, and of course what I was talking about, the fit of the gun. And I don't like using the term fit and finish because it's kind of nebulous, but you know when two parts are designed and destined and kind of star-crossed and they deserve to be together. And this slide to frame relationship is certainly no exception to that rule. The slide to frame to barrel relationship is a menage a trois of beauty. I can't say enough about how smooth this gun is even 2,000 rounds later. But wait, there's more, because before they even send this gun to me, against, and not that I have a problem with it, but some people might, they put 500 rounds of ammo through this thing before it even goes out the door. Some people might be offended by that. I'm not, because that's a pretty good sample size of, hey, before we send this out to the customer, let's make sure it works. The trigger is what I would want, and even though the trigger isn't one of those two features I'm talking about, I just figured I'd mention it while I'm on the topic of the frame to slide to barrel relationship, because the trigger ultimately tells me how good that relationship is when I pull it and it makes a loud noise and a bullet comes out the end. It's got an appropriate amount of weight, an appropriate amount of pull, an appropriate amount of take-up to give me this perfect amalgamation of reciprocation and performance that I'm looking for. Added to the weight of the gun, I've got something that is just as comfortable to shoot one-handed as it is to shoot two-handed, and that's a very hard statement to make. Then we get to my favorite feature, automatically getting out of the box, getting out of the gate, the first 500 rounds. The optic mounting system is ramped. It's something I had considered in the past. I'm not going to say I'm the first person to come up with it, but I did have the thought of why would you not at least slightly angle an optic mounting placement, an optic mounting plate to stadium set the optic itself to make dot acquisition a little more friendly for the user. That's what they did. It's only a small thing, but it's an attention to detail that, to the best of my knowledge, no one else has considered or at least put out there for the world to enjoy. So when shooting this thing with an optic, and of course I'm going to do that, it's got two great things going for it. One, that ramped, that stadium set for the optic. For the review I used a 508T. And then my irons are just, well, one, the rear sight is forward where it belongs, because backup iron sights are backup iron sights. I want them out of the way unless I need them, which is the reason why, if given the choice, that's the way I set my guns up. Two, with that stadium set, even though I don't really have a problem acquiring my dot on the draw stroke two-handed, one-handed, if I'm in an awkward position or if I'm just rushing the timer, if I'm running myself on a shot timer, occasionally I have to do my set to find it. It's just there, and it's more noticeable. And for me, being a left-handed shooter, if my dot's not in the window, I know it's high right. That's based on direction of travel and just natural inclination of the wrist to put the dot higher in the window versus low, although there are some exceptions to that rule with some shooters. This one, when it's not quite where it's supposed to be, it's sitting up at the top of the window more often than it is out when I do those quick one-handed draws if I do have to go looking for my dot. That's not something that I've seen on other optics, which tells me that just that small degree of angle, that ramping they put into their optic mounting plate, is doing exactly what I thought it was going to do when I kind of had the idea, even though, again, disclaimer, I'm probably not the first person to think of it and clearly not the first person to put it into any kind of firearm. So what about the review? Well, my review process is 2,000 rounds. The first 500 rounds, I'm just going to get a feel for the firearm, and that's exactly what I did. I used a bunch of different magazines. It comes with 2 MBX mags. I also ran Atlas magazines and STI. This gun kind of begs for a 20-round magazine just based on the full-size nature of it. However, I did run 17s. What I found is the older generation of 17-round STI mags didn't really work with the flared mag well. That's okay. That's something you got to identify. You may have to change your floor plate or whatever. Newer generation, Gen 2, Gen 3, I don't know if there is a Gen 3, but I definitely know there's a Gen 2 because I own a bunch of them. Those 17-rounders functioned flawlessly. The MBX mags it came with functioned flawlessly, and it worked with all the Atlas mags I put into it. Working with the gun for those first 5 rounds, getting it zeroed, you get a feel for how well the machine works. And I've kind of already alluded to that. The recoil behavior with the weight and just the way that well, I don't really know if I can properly kind of enunciate it with the English language, but the weight is in the right places. The gun functions beautifully with the first 500 rounds I put through it. I noticed an inherent accuracy that I've seen from some guns, but it's a little bit more rare. These days, if it's not comped or ported, I generally don't want to shoot it. This gun was definitely an exception to that rule because it's got enough weight, but it's not so heavy that on reset I have the muzzle dip, a little bit of negative recoil, which I've seen with some other guns that are kind of in this weight class. I don't know if anything can ever be truly 100% well balanced, but this is probably as close as I've seen in really any handgun that I've fired in recent memory. Now, you're probably wondering about the burn down. Well, not long ago I changed the way I did things. I do 500 rounds to get a feel for the gun, then I do the burn down. Now, in between the two is a drop test, but we'll get to the drop test because I usually kind of show you those all at once. Burn down is 500 rounds as quickly as possible to see if any problems develop with that accelerated rate of fire that you wouldn't otherwise possibly notice with the same round count over a much longer period of time. So 4 to 5 minutes versus however long it would take you to shoot 500 rounds, 2-3 trips in the range. Here's your burn down. First to last round, no issues. The trigger remained consistent. As the gun heated up and it got pretty damn warm, I didn't really experience any functioning, cycling, stuttering issues like can sometimes happen on certain guns, especially hand-fit guns. I don't want to call myself a bit of a contrarian, but sometimes I kind of take a different approach to the whole concept of hand-fit, hand-built. We invented machines for higher precision. So with proper quality control, proper replacement of tooling, it makes sense that something built by a machine where math is more a matter of algorithm versus the eye and hand tools would provide a greater degree of precision and accuracy in manufacturing. Of course, trying to constantly maintain a certain level of profit or meet a demand can lead to quality control problems even with manufacturing by machines. So it doesn't necessarily mean a gun built 100% by a machine is going to be more reliable, but generally I think of hand-fit things as more of an artistic. Kind of like a Ferrari. It's probably a super great, super fast car. Everybody says they are. Don't know, can't afford one. I've been in one, I've driven one at a track, but I didn't really have an appreciation for ownership. I can just kind of do some Googling and see how expensive they are. So while a Ferrari is probably a fine-tuned, somewhat hand-built machine, it's probably not something that you would regularly or would be your first choice to take on a grueling, 2,500, 3,000 mile road trip for various reasons. So is the Chambers building Ferraris? Is it something that's going to perform great if you do constant maintenance to it? Well, after the first 500 rounds and then the 500 round burn down, this thing is kind of a balance between, I don't know, if we're using the car analogy, let's stick with that, a Ferrari and like a Toyota Hilux. It's got the lines, it's got the sexy behavior, it's got the good performance, but it's also ridiculously reliable insofar as I had 1,000 rounds into it at that point. I was seeing performance. I wouldn't say I didn't expect it, because like I said, I had talked to Joe and got an idea of how much he knew about the guns. I mean, the man's a wealth of knowledge if you're not familiar, and definitely you should be. But I was expecting something, a slide stutter, the occasional slide failing to lock back on a magazine, one of those little gremlins that we get from this type of weapon, and I didn't experience that. Now again, this is sample size of 1, but 1,000 rounds in, I was pretty damn impressed. Now the rest of the review is just continuing to work the gun into my personal practice, getting a more accurate feel for it, appreciation for the quality or lack thereof in the review. Doing one-hand manipulations on that optic system, because the optic system is proprietary to Chambers, although he can do it to other guns. If you order Chambers and you want an optic system, this is the one you're going to get. One-handed manipulations were definitely something that had to be included in that, and that's basically where I use the optic body itself, if I have to manipulate the gun when shooting one-handed, which is something we teach in firearms. If you don't have the ability to use both hands, and you've got to reciprocate the slide because of a malfunction or something like that, we used to teach just using iron sights. Catch them on something, rip them off your gear, off a foreign object, off a barrier, whatever. With an optic there, this is the only time I'd even advocate it. You can use the optic body, and it's a much more sure way to get that slide to reciprocate. So that was something that I do include in my review process with anything optic or optic mounting related. Any gun that has the ability to carry an optic is something I'm going to include. Then we get to durability. I'm not checking the durability of the optic. I'm already well familiar with the durability of the Holosun 508T. I put it on this gun specifically because if there was going to be a problem, it probably wasn't going to be optic related. I'm looking at the quality of the optic mounting system, Chambers' proprietary optic mounting system. So I'm going to do a trop test every 500 rounds, shoulder height on either flagstone or pavement. The whole purposes of the drop test is to deliver a ridiculous amount, almost unrealistic amount of shock to either an optic mounting system, an optic mount, or an optic, depending on what we're doing in a review, to see if it causes any issues, any shift, any damage, to make sure it's reliable and it can take a beating if it needs to. Bear down, here's your drop tests. Now, came through without any visible issues, but one thing I do every 500 rounds with the drop is I verify that the gun is still zeroed, because that's probably going to be the first sign that there's something amiss with an optic or an optic mounting system, in this case an optic mounting system. So here is a 5-round group, and of course this is a question as well, how accurate is the gun? Well, from a bench rest position, shooting from 25 yards, firing 124 grain gold dot, here is my 0 confirmation group I shot before the first drop test. Jesus. Look, I've shot some accurate handguns, and again, this is bench rest, taking as much of the human element out of it as possible, but you can't not be impressed by that. 2,000 rounds later, 4 drop tests later, I fired another 5-round group, bench rest supported, from 25 yards, shooting the same ammunition, literally out of the same box, 124 grain gold dot. Are you serious? I was expecting the gun to return to 0. I was even expecting to shoot a good group. I wasn't expecting to shoot the textbook definition of a good group. Now, I play a small part in this, and I know they say it's the Indian, not the arrow, but you gotta have a good arrow. And this is, and just sticking with the analogy, a great arrow. This is a fantastic gun. This is probably my favorite execution of this particular type of firearm. I've got the design features of a 1911 with the double stack capacity that I know and love when it comes to guns that I would carry. And this is something that language fails me. I gotta be honest. I was excited about this gun going into it, even though I was trying to remain as objective as possible. The cool thing about being objective is, as long as I hold myself to the same review standard, I can still be excited about things, although it's going to add to my disappointment if something fails. So I was holding myself, like I would, to my standard review process, going through these 2,000 rounds, and at the end of 2,000 rounds, I'm just as excited about this gun as I was when I fired the first 5-round groups and got a good feel for how well the gun performed. If I had anything bad to say, it's the grip swell, the grip size, because 2011s, 2019s, double stack 1911s, whatever you want to call them, everybody takes a slightly different approach to the grip behavior, and a lot of companies just buy their frames from STI and kind of do their own work to them. There's nothing wrong with that, because manufacturing a frame is a ridiculous amount of cost that you don't necessarily have to do if someone's providing you third-party support and you can buy a frame from them. It's a little chunky, and that's probably my only complaint. I have average size hands, whatever. I usually don't have a problem shooting double stack capacity like 40 cal, 45, 9mm. This gun, I can get just enough hand around it, and I'm comfortable shooting it. I'm comfortable shooting it fast. I'm comfortable shooting it slow. I'm comfortable shooting it in the rain. I'd probably be comfortable shooting it on a train. But I would like to take maybe a fraction of an inch out of the overall circumference of the grip surface, which can be done. I can do that, but I feel like it would be a travesty and a crime against nature to change anything about the way this gun behaves. So even though I want to take a little bit of the circumference out of the grip, I'm going to believe that it's intentional. And it's intentional from a person that knows way more about this than I do. So I'm going to defer to his wisdom and his judgment, saying that's the way that gun's supposed to be, and don't you dare change anything about it. Those of you who aren't familiar with chambers may have done some Googling and been like, oh God, because they are expensive and they're worth every penny. You're going to wait because it's a hand-built, hand-fit gun. So you're going to order it and you're going to stand by. And that's okay. I don't mind waiting as long as there's good communication. And one thing I had was really good communication from the process and how things were going, and got a heads up when the gun was about to go out the door, and some final questions about things that I might want or might like. And that wasn't because Joe knew I was going to do a review of this gun. That's just the way he is. Get one. Sell whatever you got to sell. Kidneys, other guns, whatever. If you like this style of gun, this is probably the one you're going to own, and then you're going to look down on every other gun you've owned and be like, why can't you be like this gun? That being said, there are tiers, and I know I'm going to get questions. Well, if you only had one. If I only had one, it'd be this one. And even though I hate that hypothetical question, I can honestly answer it. This one, if there was some crazy reason why I couldn't own more than one handgun, and they're like, hey, if you could only have one 2011 or whatever, which one would you own? Again, hate that question because it's unrealistic, and I'm not a big fan of hypothetical questions generally. This would be it. I'd be like, okay, you know, if I gotta live in the fantasy land that you're presenting in this question, that would be the gun that I would choose. There are other guns that do just as well, and that doesn't mean that there aren't other good 2011 or 2019s. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is there are tiers of quality, and Chambers is at the top. I'm Aaron Count with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.